Ukrainian forces have crossed the Sotovikin line, but things are not settled just yet. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's August 30th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first we're taking a look at the control map. There's a couple of significant changes, right? The most significant of which, as you guys can see right here, this is from the 28th to the 29th, right? We're not seeing Ukrainian forces advance their total area of distinct control, but what you are seeing is crucially this line of contestation. This is where both forces are operating. Now includes a portion of the second line of fortifications, which according to most reports, this front line is actually just an anti-tank ditch and obstacles, right? And this line is the actual dug-in Russian positions. So again, you see Ukrainian forces beginning to operate in this area, right? Now, Russia, of course, has reinforced this area with VDV forces and a number of other reserve troops, or just about anybody they can scrounge up. And they are trying to, by some reports, fix Ukrainian forces, right? Turn this into a meat grinder for Ukraine's remaining combat power. So this is one of the biggest questions, again, of the conflict. And I will say that Ukrainian forces also reportedly are engaging in some pretty extensive demining operations, and that's a pretty core component of trying to create conditions that will allow them to really exploit this. But the demining is a slow, arduous process, and it is not it is inherently not a quick method. Remember, you're looking at even their best mine clearing technology, the Miklik, can do 100 meters at a time. So for those of you keeping track at home, if you need to clear, right, here is what a Miklik can do in one fire. It can cover this much area, right? So I say this because this is a really, really small area, and they're going to have to iterate this a lot of times. Even if you can get 300 meters, right? You're looking at just a tiny total area. And remember, they're doing this under the eyes of Russian troops who are still operating in these areas. So I say this because they need to this is going very, very slowly. And this is the problem with not just this Ukrainian offensive, but all offensives in this conflict, is that when things go slowly, right, Russia has a chance to dig in, right? Because Russia is, at this point in the conflict, on the defensive. They're trying to maintain control of all of these areas here, and they get the advantage of having to make the Ukrainians come to them. And they have been exploiting this advantage, again, using mines, pre-planned artillery fires. And the longer this contested area, this area remains heavily contested, the more time Russia has to deploy its elite troops. Some other areas where we've seen changes, though, notably, right, this where Ukrainian forces liberated in Priutine, you can see Russian forces counterattacking, somewhat driving them out of these couple of windbreaks. And in the north, you can see that near this Novoheorivka, you can see that Ukrainian forces actually moving to liberate this patch of forest. Again, I think this you shouldn't take a lot of changes here as being too meaningfully significant. I think this is a very sparsely manned line, and even more sparsely manned now, given that Russia has pulled off a number of its forces from this northern region to stabilize the situation in Zaporizhzhia. And so I think Ukrainian forces, the limited amount there, are pushing in and taking the territory they can. But the danger of major territorial changes, I think, is pretty low, simply because there isn't all the combat power spread across these lines. It's just pretty anemic for anything other than like platoon and company size counterattacks. And I think that's what you're seeing here. But again, you can only man a line this thin for so long before you start to have problems. And Russia should know as well as anybody that you can only rob from one place to shore up another for so long before you start to get into deeper existential problems. When we look over at the combat map, you can see Ukrainian forces being very tight-lipped about activities by the enemy and themselves in the entire Zaporizhzhia region. Obviously, we can infer that there are Russian counterattacks because this is where Russian forces are in most need of counterattacks, right? So we can infer that it's happening. Obviously, there is no way there is not artillery fire absolutely going berserk here in Zaporizhzhia. So don't take this to mean anything else. But 4 hours ago, right, Ukrainian forces are reporting success in both the direction of Verbove and Novodanyelivka. So a positive sign overall when you see this sort of stuff. I think probably a good sign that they are trying to advance not just towards Verbove and into the Russian defensive lines, but also towards Tokmak. And you can see Russian forces, again, maintaining a level of counteroffensive actions, about 35 spread across from about the midpoint of Svatova all the way south towards Donetsk city. Looking at Twitter, right, the rumor mill. Again, the rumor mill is reporting a number of accounts or tweeting that there is some sort of Ukrainian presence across what they call the Sotovikin line, the Russian main defensive lines here. But it's not clear that this is a permanent presence. And again, you're seeing Ukrainian troops sort of attempt to push back Russian forces in a wide swath of area, right? Trying to really apply pressure across this entire front line. But particularly right there near Verbova. And so they also say that Ukrainian forces may want to secure this town of Kopani. This, of course, would make sense because if you occupied the town, you would get fields of fire that would prevent Russian counterattacks through a large area. Again, bear in mind, these arrows, you see them and you go, oh, why aren't Ukrainian forces more concentrated? And the reason that Ukraine needs to disperse its forces is, one, there are very narrow channels in which they can pass through these minefields, extremely narrow. And there is a point at which when you have a narrow path that you've carved, that there's no value add. In fact, it's a liability to put dozens and dozens of tanks. We've all seen the same videos where a lead tank gets taken out in a minefield. Imagine if instead of 3 other tanks, it was 30, right? They would go from a tactical defeat to an operational disaster. So Ukraine instead is trying to find this balance between concentrating its forces into a fist that can knock out Russian troops and pushing into and dispersing its forces sufficiently to ensure that there's never a dangerous concentration or that these minefields don't serve their function and concentrate Ukraine's forces to the point where they become trapped by their own tanks, so to speak. So that is sort of the needle that they're trying to thread. Momentum is on Ukraine's side. I think the odds look good that they will make it to Verbova, but the question is now, having had days and days to stabilize the situation, will it be as exploitable as if it had happened quickly, right? Are Russian troops currently trying to cut off these lines and establish new defensive trenches facing to east and west? That's what I would do if I was a commander. I would see this situation and I would try to mitigate the dangers of Ukraine rolling through these trench works, trying to establish new defensive lines, new pre-plant fires, deploying new obstacles from a greater variety of directions. But you can see that, again, if you're Russian troops in this sort of Ekin line, you're in a bad spot simply because you have Ukrainian troops to your west and to your north, and increasingly to your south. So it's a dangerous spot to be in. And I think, again, it bodes positively for Ukraine's efforts. Anyway, guys, if you've been on the live stream, you know that I have finally launched something I've been talking about for a long time. When I was in Afghanistan, I used to have these big bottles of energy drinks, right? These cans of energy drinks called Rippets. If you served in the military, you know what I'm talking about. That was the only way I could get energy on these intense combat patrols. So I would oftentimes stuff like 2 or 3 of them in my cargo pockets. Well, finally, and then I would use them to like fuel my workouts afterward. I just felt gross after like 3 carbonated energy drinks. I felt disgusting. So I finally have decided to solve that problem by creating Strike Gum. Strike Gum is, I worked with a manufacturer here in the USA out in Denver, and we figured out a way to take an entire pre-workout shake and concentrate it inside a single piece of chewing gum, right? It's mint flavored. It tastes great. And boy, it hits hard. If you're somebody who's like a caffeine sensitive person, this might not be for you. But if you are tired at the end of the day and you are looking for a way to supercharge your workouts, give yourself that surge of energy, this is the gum for you. Also, even better, 50% of the profits from this first production run of Strike Gum are going to get donated to Ukrainian charities that help civilians who've been injured or displaced in the conflict. Something obviously near and dear to my own heart. So if you want to support it, you can check out strikegum.com. Right. And you can buy a pack or you can buy a tray, which is actually relative to a tub of pre-workout, actually a much better deal. You get like 75 servings of pre-workout for the cost of what usually they sell for like 50 in like a GNC. And of course, if you've always wanted to be a content creator or get into affiliate marketing, you can actually earn 10% of the total sales volume that people get through your link. If you sign up for the affiliate program, we actually have a Discord with almost over a dozen affiliates right now in there. They're all working together, sharing information, and we've already seen some of our affiliates start to generate sales. It's been really cool. So thanks to everybody that's picked some up so far. And if you're interested, you can go to strikegum.com. Link is in the description. I think I'm probably going to throw the banner up there as well. Anyway, let's talk real quick from the Institute for the Study of War. You, of course, have the reports we talked about yesterday of Ukrainian advances in Robtina. But there is also, reports Ukrainian forces they're securing their positions and demining the area. There is rumors that Robtina is on the highway to Tokmak, an important Russian, they call it ground line of communication, supply and logistics hub. It's a better way to think of it. But again, it looks easy on the map to get there. Reality is that is probably one of the most well-defended roads in the entire world at this point. One Russian mill blogger is saying that Russian forces are continuing to commit significant reserves, airborne forces, and of course their thermobaric artillery systems to the Robtina area, which means that Russian forces are either worried about the vulnerability of their positions or that Russian forces intend to deplete the Ukrainian offensive potential by fixing their forces in engagements in the settlement and eliminating them. So definitely a high-risk sort of event where it seems like both sides are committing heavily to the battle. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Thank you so much to our Colonel tier members at combatvetnews.com. Thank you to our Lieutenant tier members. And of course, thank you to all the members of Combat Vet News that support what I do and ensure that I can continue to do this. Anyway, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.